What's up, everybody? Today we are going to try to produce some organic looking scales using a combination of Fusion 360 and Blender. Let's go. Oh, but before we get started, let's look at the most boring resin lapse you've ever seen. That was terrible, bro. I've been on a quest to produce natural looking scales for my molds for quite some time now, and it's led me kind of all over the place. And I wanted to give you a quick update, really in the hopes that someone smarter than me will be able to take this process and refine it a little bit better while I sit around and struggle with Blender. But let me overview the process I'm at right now and the results I'm getting. So you produce the mold in Fusion 360, and then what you want to do is export each half of the mold as an OBJ file and high refinement. This is somewhat key that I found, that you don't want to do anything less than high when you're going back and forth because, well, Blender's high, bro. All right, so once you have your OBJ file exported, we need to open up Blender. Now, I do not know Blender hardly at all. I am like a blind squirrel looking for a nut in there. It's crazy how complicated this software is. I wanted to share this with you because if you know Blender better than I do, you'll be able to get far better results. But here's the basic idea, right? You load your OBJ into Blender. You then go into sculpt mode, and the first thing you want to do, you'll see it's all kind of, your mold looks like garbage right now. You need to remesh it. So if you just click over in the little tool icon, go down to remesh and just click remesh, and it will look like nothing is happening. You know, it'll just sit there for a while. And then all of a sudden, magically, boom, your mold looks normal again. Pretty freaking sweet, right? That is key, because I was trying to do it without, before I figured out remeshing, and it just was like garbage. Like, it's not useful at all, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use a texture, and specifically, we're gonna use a scale texture, and textures in this case are black and white images, basically. So you can go on to Google, and you can search for like scale, texture, scale, displacement map, scale, height map, and find black and white kind of scale patterns, if you will. And that's what you want to use. I'll have a link to the one I'm using in this demonstration in the description below if you just want to use this one. I like this one in particular because it is a little more organic. It's not, you know, just rows and rows of sameness in the scales. You know, like normal fish. Fish don't have like absolutely perfect scales most of the time. All right, so anyways, we go to the texture button, which is this little checkerboard over here on the right-hand side. We click new, we click open, and then we find our scale pattern, and we just open that up, and then we're good. Again, I can't really give you a complete tutorial on using textures in Blender. There's 5 million videos out there. I'll have a playlist at the end of all of the Blender tutorials that I have found useful in this process. And so you can watch those same ones as well. But again, you can just look for Blender texture tutorials and it will walk you through most of this stuff. Just be careful, Blender is rapidly under development. Current version is 2.9, they're about to come out with 3.0. So if you see any given Blender tutorial, try to make sure it is at least version 2.8, because 2.8 and 2.9 are pretty similar in all of this stuff. Don't get anything older, because I went down that path. It was super, super confusing. So now we have our texture in here. We need to do something with it. So if we go back and click on these little tool icons here, and you'll see we go down to texture, and we want to choose stencil. Now when we choose stencil, if we take our mouse and go back into the main viewport, you'll see our stencil kind of appears over here on the left corner, bottom left corner. If you hold the right mouse button, click and hold the right mouse button, you can drag the stencil over and put it over kind of the area you want to be in. Okay, and so if you need to rotate it, as we do here, I hold down the control key, right click, and then move the mouse around and you can rotate it in the position you want. If you need to scale it, you can hold down the shift key, click right mouse button, and scale it up and down, bigger and smaller. Our stencil is in the place we want it to be. We have selected the draw brush. And what we want to do right now is change the strength of that brush. So if you click in the upper left at the very top, you'll see there's this strength thing. Just click on it. And I like to use 0.2. And all this is kind of as you roll your brush over the texture, how much it's going to, imprint that texture into the model. The higher this number is, the steeper the gradient or the more power or strength obviously it has pulling it out. We don't want to deform our mold greatly with our scales. We want kind of a nice light touch for the most part. So I like to start at 0.2. As you brush over it more, it'll get higher and higher. And so that's kind of the tricky part and the artistic part, if you will, of this process. So once you click on 0.2, you can change your brush diameter, same place, up by the strength. Just click on it and type in a number. I also found you can click hit the F key and then move your scroll wheel up and down to change the size as well, and then click the left mouse button, to set it. And that can be helpful as well. Again, millions of Blender tutorials. So now you're ready to start putting your pattern into place. And so you just click the left mouse button and drag and paint over the area that you want to have a scale pattern with. And this is the part, again, that gets kind of tricky. You want to keep it away from the flat parts of your mold if you can, and obviously keep it away from any other parts of the mold you don't want. I believe if you want to make this process easier, you would use masking. I have not gotten into that yet, but if you go find some Blender masking tutorials, that might be helpful here. And masking is just basically covering up an area of your model to where it doesn't get the stencil when you put your mouse over it. That would be super useful. Okay, so once you're satisfied with your scale results here, again, you can go over it 50 million times and get a different result every time. The last thing you want to do is you want to remesh again. Now, I am not 100% sure this is required, but I didn't do it once and I got a model back out without my scales. So I think it's very important. So again, click on the little toolbox up here, go down to remesh and just click remesh. You don't need to change any of these settings. All right, once that is done, we are ready to export it. So you just click on File, Export, STL, save it where you normally save it, and you're good to go. Now you want to do this obviously with the other side of the mold as well, so you just repeat the process. You can actually bring them both in at the same time if you want to, and just hit this little eyeball up here to turn one off and on. That's how you can get some better symmetry, if you will. It's up to you, right? I kind of like that one side has a slightly different scale pattern than the other, but I'm just a weirdo like that. So now all that's left to do is print it. You just load it into, in this case, I'm using Chi-Chu box, whatever slicer you want to use is fine, doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And you just want to load it in. You can see our pretty scale pattern is in the model, so it'll come out in the print, which is exactly what we want. Hint print. Go ahead and slice it up, do whatever you normally do when you print it, and then watch the most boring resin lapse again. And here are our results. Pretty killer dude. So I hope you found that useful, guys. All the Blender tutorials that I use to kind of learn the very little I've learned so far in this playlist right here. And if you want to see how I make the initial molds in Fusion 360, I have a full playlist for that here. Take care and tight lines.